I never think about efficiency, and I don't think about the purpose. I don't think about strategy, I don't think about what the art wants from you. I ask myself, but we need through the art, When I was studying in Osaka at the university, I had a really desire to not to leave the country, but more to see other culture, for example, Europe. I never thought about do art education in Europe. It was not meant and it was not planned. I always thought about being a creator, but not in that way specific. So it all happened when I came to Europe. And also it was not my first desire to go to Spain. So many things occasionally happened, and this is my life. I never planned in that way exactly. I think I wanted to do the sculpture, but they put me to the class of painting. This is also, these kind of coincidences. And so I studied painting. It was a very traditional school. At that time, in the 70s, Spain was completely other country. It was not Europe. It was more something else. It was under Franco regime. And in the south, it was cut from the older civilization, which was for me very, very interesting. And also, I really enjoy that. It was outside of all the contemporary happenings, but also it was very much direct connection to the nature. The time was extended as kind of eternity. Imagine I came from Tokyo, and it was already kind of a speedy. So arriving in Granada, Sevilla, it was like going back to medieval with time machine. For me, it's not thinking of the past. It's forming me, and it's me now too. So it's even important. And all other not important things I forget. I finished the study, somehow I have a title, but with this title I could not find any job. I wanted to be independent. It was always my desire, as a woman, as a human. I really wanted to be economically also, spiritually, for any kind of independent. It's so important. So I have seen it's not so possible, it's not so easy. And then installed myself in Lucerne, afterwards in Zurich. So my career, artistic career, I don't like the word, but I started somehow in Switzerland. I didn't know in Spain anything about boys, anything about, older art movement, which was kind of great, because I was innocent, and I always wanted to keep this innocence. On the other side, I want to also say, hey, I'm an artist, I have something to say. And this is a long struggle, but it started in Switzerland. And then I left Switzerland. It was, I think, 83, I got the prize from Nuremberg city, and I could work for the first time, dedicating myself only to art. And suddenly I could see the political history about Germany, and it's common with Japan. And it was so interesting for me, not only to be connected, but to be conscious about what happened during the Second World War. There's a lot of wound and also problems that people want to forget. But I could feel that in the city. And it persuaded me to this confrontation, but also exploring this situation, which does not mean that I was starting to work a political issue. It's more about this, it's about humans, the struggle of human beings. It's destroying and a new construction of city or whatever, and it's all the history of 2,000 years. So we are kind of it's a tragic. On the other side, we all are kind of responsible to this aspect. So I started to think about this primordially about ourselves, and this research into yourself was for me that time the most important. And this is my vocabulary that maybe started to work in Nuremberg. First maybe in Switzerland, Zurich, but also in Nuremberg I really could do very concentrated. And all the language about is a bit about this young, this psychologist and all these archetype of forms, archetype of psychological, but also it's about beyond the time, beyond the culture, we have something common. And that's what I believe, and I believed. So I decided somehow stay in Germany. Moving from Nuremberg to München, and München to Cologne. I was then kind of included in that scene, the art scene, but also never completely belonging to the movement. But at the time, 80-something, there was a lot of artistic movement as well, if you remember. It was trans-avant-garde, which was also kind of Italian scene, and in Germany was new wild painters, but mainly male artists. So, I was alongside, not that in the center, but I was part of that somehow because my way of using the language, like telling stories, and also a bit expressive way, they put me also into this category, which is but wrong because I'm not that. But anyway, so this was very library time. It's very interesting because there came not only German artists also, but from all over the world. It's like Berlin now. At that time, Cologne was a very important city for the art and the artist. And after doing big paintings like others, I started to rethink about not only about art, the meaning, but also my relationship to all what I'm doing, reflecting, and then started to be very critical. I left Cologne for maybe 1 year, and I went to the mountains, living alone and working. And this kind of, my life is, I told you about coincidences, about things happening and encounter. So one day somebody invited me to work in between the mountains. And this was a turning point in my artistic work and also life. It helped me to have distance to these art market things, and also to refined myself to be critical to all of what I have done and the situation through the nature to be more spiritual. And this is not a theory, you have to live in it. And this was what happened in the south of Switzerland. And so I'm very much connected to this element of nature. When I came back from the mountains, I started to paint smaller scales and also working on clay or with clay and fire them. I discovered then to glaze, and the color that appears was astonishing. And I really liked that because of the fact that you don't control it, not completely. So as I told you, I like all the things, mixture of your will and what happens by chance. This is a beautiful thing with clay. It's a material needs time to get dried and to get ready to be fired. It takes another couple of months. And this kind of patience and also this letting be, letting go, it's a kind of a matureness about also being an artist, I would say. But at that time I was very young and very impatient, and so I had to learn a lot. Colors with watery colors, it's so different than oil painting. It's kind of like Western and the Eastern way of thinking, in a way. I interpret it sometimes, even I don't, separate that both way of thinking. Sometimes they are very connected, other times very different. But coming from the East, I was fascinated by, of course, Velázquez, El Greco, all the great, great painters. They're the painter of the will and the masters of the skills and technique and ideas, and so this is a traditional European painting. But I'm coming from the other tradition, with these watery things, It's not about only watercolors, but it's based on water. All these techniques that he used in Asia, in Japan. But the real fascination started to really, I think, when I did watercolor series of the female figures. It was a concentration of figure, like the figure is not only humans, but also it started to be a mixturing. It's kind of a hybrid beings. It makes, it's happened by water, because water makes the colors change in such a different way, in a combination with paper. So the fascination by this aspect was similar also to the aspect in ceramic and working with clay and glaze. When I came here to Europe, I denied not my origin, but I do not want to identify myself only in that cultural context. I am, first of all, a human being, like you and every other, humans. And this was the proof that I really needed, first of all. Then the second step and third step, of course, I started to appreciate. Because if you know in another country, you can start to appreciate because of the distance. The ink experience is so, as a child, we had to learn the calligraphy, but not that you started to make the painting, the letters. We have to make ink first. So this is the most beautiful things. That's a process. you have to prepare this, being modest, being somehow, and so giving time and dedicating yourself for something that you don't know or what, but yes, you make ink. So minutes and minutes, and sometimes, if you do half an hour, it's all right. If you do 1 hour, the ink is so ready that it becomes depth. And the density, this is so beautiful. So you see the quality of, even you put one line of this ink, the blackness is different than the blackness of what if you do very quickly, the blackness has no depth. This is the experience that I have done as a child. I'm not doing now. It's not that point as for me elaborating about technique, but the spirit. I don't think that there exists the nature somehow wide and far away from us. But what I'm looking for is not that visible nature in this way of a romantic way, but more about physical things. On one side, this material touch and smells and all things that sensitive and sensual things. On the other side, also our imagination. And this imagination is coming from inside of our bodies, feeling, I think, if any cosmic surrounding, it's one side, it's huge, eternal cosmic space, which we have it in ourselves. And this is a scale that I would like to approach. It's not the nature of the 18th century or the modernism things, but more about the energy, which is not possible to define it. So when I start to paint, it's more about rhythms. I don't know where to go. So I sometimes start to paint, it's a huge one, start to paint on the floor. And it's unconscious. So, but I could see reflecting after that. It's where my imagination is going to the pictorial space. So this pictorial space is that what makes me possible form and changing slightly. For example, if I do the line or big lines with brushes, and there's a undulation or waves, I will always think about waves and also about circulation. For me, the two things. One, the most elemental form is for me the roundness at the beginning of the life, and undulation, the waves. And the waves is so somehow from the sea. As I told you, I'm coming from the sea. And I say sometimes I'm not a child of my parents. I'm the child of the sea, from the sea. So I really believe it. I feel it. And so when I've been in the mountains, it was so funny because this is also waves, So that's it. So simple. Mm-hmm. So we are between the circulation and the waves. And all the things that's happening out of these primordial forms. You know what I mean? And then suddenly transforms it into figures or into something else, or mountains or trees and so this is looks like against the civilization, which is not. But it's my language, Start to paint somehow trees, but trees are incarnation of the figures, or me, or part of, it's like a portrait, or emotional portrait. And so all the themes are connected each other. I cannot say, so this is girl's section, this is a section of trees, and this is a section of mountains. They are all mirroring each other, connecting each other, and yeah. It's a certain period I'm doing, and then after a while I need to transform all these works into other forms. So it's a never-ending process of this transformation, but that I call the transfiguration because of this. It's kind of a beings. It's not just only abstract. For me, everything is abstract also, but at the same time, it's something. And what is that? I don't know sometimes. It's kind of between forms. I think it's kind of a stage of thoughtlessness and I am so much here that I am at the same time absent. Maybe it's like the moment of being a media. It's about this moment of I'm sliding away from this world, you know, but I'm here. It's energy which is belonging to me, but also belonging to other sphere, I would say. And it's not that if the piece is now succeeding or not. It's not about that. So it's this moment that I react. It's I'm faster than what the color does or what the water does, you know. Or sometimes it's different. The water is faster. So it's about this. It's not reacting quickly because of you know, I want to do something fast. No, it's about something consciousness and against the consciousness. I should not react rationally. I'm not seeing what I'm doing. Of course I see, but I don't see. I follow the movement of this element. And this is why it's so interesting, this watercolor. And when I visited the museum, that museum itself was in water, so the museum was itself like a medium as well. So this is what I'm fascinated by. Painting is more reflected. You have all distance. You see what you are doing, and this is objectivity. It does not allow me being always into the process, and this is sometimes tricky because I don't want that. I don't want me always watching as myself, because it's like giving gas and braking, you know? You know, we work at the studio and it's with ourselves. This idea of a holistic idea or just intimate, all these are very important thoughts, but I would like to also show it so that people can live in it and feel it, you know? This macrocosmos and microcosmos, because we are all that, you know? And but if the space allows us to do, it's a very happy situation. It's also kind of a very important process. It's nothing to do with exhibition, you know, exhibition. It's more, it's this so similar intention and necessity to do the space, to create the space. It's not just showing the works. This eventually help. All these works can help with this attitude to transform the museum space into something else. This is what I would like to. Also, it's all about transformation. I'm very conscious and also curious about people who made their own expression, painting or sculpting, but not being a conscious, being an artist. So, for example, this kind of, how do you call that, outsider art? People who had it completely as an ability. They're not at all interested in fame or being, famous as an artist. But they have attention to express themselves, otherwise they go mad, So these people use this kind of archetypes. But everybody has its own. And I'm very, very much fascinated by their own special languages. There's obsession, energy, and the complete commitment into visualizing their world. So this is mainly said the two type of works that I'm fascinated. So on one side, from this observation and of the visual world, and on the other side, this pictorial inner world, especially if you go into you might find it. But sometimes it makes you crazy somehow, because it's a bit underneath our consciousness. So this unconsciousness and consciousness, I'm very much concerned, and they both interest me. Yeah, everyone has its own different forms, but it's in the root very similar. And this is the kind of a hope that from different worlds you can understand each other through this pictorial language. And this, I don't think that it does die, even because of the art fashion changes. Of course, in the art history, the Western art history is one thing. The Western art history denied the time before. It was always kind of against. Nobody asks you to create a new value. So they just deny it first, and then we will see what happens. But sometimes nothing happens. So it's the denying itself and breaking or destroying or only, I think it's not enough now, because we are lost. And so we needed to create, again, thinking about the value. And this is not irony, this is not cynical things. The topic of originality, which is boring for me. So I don't care about that. If it's always thinking about, then, oh, you can do that. Now, any figures, then many figures done. That is absurd. I would say for myself, it's always following kind of a pictorial intelligence, which is, if it exists, learning that and following this necessity of what I really want to realize or express, this emotional aspect, and also the needs to be human nowadays, being conscious about the world, that's where we are now. So the very intimate things based very much, you know, social and political awareness, but the base is through us. And this combination is difficult, but worth to trying, I would say. Every day we're born, every morning we get born, and then we're not dying in the night, but you know, at this kind of, if we're talking about consciousness, we have a big traveling every night, you know, we go to other world and then coming back, and so this repetition, it's like aspiration of the cosmos, and we adjust according to these rhythms. And if we get into these rhythms, we will maybe happiest creatures, because we can create also something. But it's not always like that. We're not always living with these rhythms of the, even not the nature, I think even huge, more other cosmic, you know, will. And if we get into even just a short moment, we could create something. But it's very short. So I told you, after 1 hour, I was almost, you know, exhausted. Not physically, but because of this tension. It's like a voodoo dance, I would say. Maybe I'm a witch.